Were police immediately suspicious?
The deputies asked, "Do you think that Lynn was suicidal?" Her response was, "I don't know."
Constantly going to the hospital, the doctors really couldn't determine what it was.
What did you think happened to her?
This is not a suicide, and really kicked off the homicide investigation.
There was actually some beacon of hope. Days later, she's found deceased.
But I didn't kill her.
It really is like a horror story, and she resorted to murder to cover her tracks.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Pewaukee, Wisconsin. Police and medics were called to a woman's home where they found her dead. Prescription bottles around the body suggested that her death may have been an accidental overdose or suicide. However, there were clues suggesting this might not have been what it seemed. October 3rd in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, a 911 call came in of a woman in distress. First responders arrived within minutes.
Jesse Krzyzewski called 911 to report coming to her friend Lynn Hernon's home.
There was pill bottles, loose medication out near her. There was a plate near her with some powder that almost looked like crushed medication on it. Lynn had some powder on her mouth and nose and on her chest, and she was deceased at that point.
Jesse told police that the woman's name was Lynn Hernon and that they were good friends.
She had no idea what could have happened. She appeared upset. The deputies asked Ms. Krzyzewski, "Well, do you think that Lynn was suicidal?" And her response at that point in time was, "I don't know, maybe." It was kind of a mystery.
She was coming over once or twice a week. First responders heard her say she was a caregiver to Lynn Hernon.
Police looked through the condo for anything that might reveal more about the victim and her state of mind. And what else were police looking for in a death like this?
They're, of course, immediately looking for, are there signs of forced entry? Does it look like a struggle happened? And in this case, they didn't really see any of that. The only area that was somewhat of a mess was around Lynn's body, where there was numerous prescription bottles, powder from crushed up pills.
Because of the scene, did police have their suspicions as to what caused the death?
It's hard to tell intent when you're on a scene. Certainly there was no suicide note.
Police discovered a document near the body that suggested the victim had a hand in her own death.
So they really didn't find what I would call a true or stereotypical suicide note. They certainly took photographs of, I want to say it's a power of attorney form, sort of sticking up in a folder of documents as if somebody had pulled it out to, make it obvious.
As police continued their investigation, their only source of information was Jesse. They learned that she was a longtime friend to Lynn, who really had no one else to look after her. What was the relationship like between Lynn and Jesse?
The only person that seemed to have a lot of contact with her was the one who called authorities, and she remained on scene. They took a number of photographs to sort of preserve the scene just in case.
In the days following the death of Lynn Hernon, police conducted follow-up interviews so the coroner could issue a death certificate. Jesse was more than willing to provide information about her friend's life and untimely death. According to Jesse, the two were like family. So if Jesse described them as family, there must have been some kind of long-term history between the two.
Lynn didn't have any next of kin at the time of her death. Jesse's mother, Jennifer, was friends with Lynn for a very, very long time. So when Jennifer had Jesse, Lynn treated her like a daughter. And they knew each other for 30 years at the point in time when she died.
Jesse told police that Lynn had been struggling with mysterious health issues for years.
About 2016 or so, Lynn started having a lot of gastrointestinal pains and stomach issues that she was constantly going to the hospital visits for.
So what was her health like in the weeks or months before she was found dead?
So she was released from Waukesha Memorial Hospital just a few days prior to her death, and that hospitalization was a lengthy one. At the end of that hospital stay, there was actually some beacon of hope, and a matter of days later, she's found deceased.
Based on conversations with Jessie, the victim had little contact with the outside world in recent years. It was almost as if there was no one in Lynn's life beyond this one friend. Police tried to determine what, if anything, occurred in the days leading up to her death.
She is released from the hospital, but we do know that some of her friends had tried to reach out to her there. What she did in those 2 or 3 days, we don't know exactly, but I don't think that any of Lynn's real friends saw her after that hospitalization before her death.
Investigators had nearly completed their report on the death of Lynn Hernon. All that was missing was the autopsy findings that would change the course of the investigation and cause police to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about this death. Waukesha County investigators had examined the death of Lynn Hernon as best they could. Her isolation made it difficult, and police were careful not to rush to judgment. The case remained open because of questions about it being a suicide or accidental overdose. An autopsy report would provide answers to close the case, and police were not the only ones waiting for the report.
Jessie was very, very interested in the results of the autopsy and the results of the toxicology in this case.
Did Jessie give a reason for this major interest in Lynn's autopsy report?
She wanted the cause of death really to see if maybe a hospital or a doctor missed something, almost as if she was setting up possible litigation. Is there somebody, we can hold responsible for maybe missing a medical issue with Lynn?
Jessie's constant phone calls put investigators on alert. They began to question her financial motives in the death of Lynn Hernon.
When we started looking through the estate documents of Lynn Hernon, because Jessie was named the personal representative, we noticed she had 20 or so credit card accounts, a large amount, I'm talking thousands of dollars of debt owed to these credit card companies. And so those closest to Lynn knew that didn't sound right, didn't sound like Lynn.
According to the few who managed to remain close to Lynn Hernon in her final years, she began to notice money was missing from her accounts.
Lynn was becoming suspicious. She would say to people that she didn't know what was happening to her money, but we know that her money was leaving her account in ways she didn't understand and that she was not responsible for.
While financial experts conducted a forensic exam of Lynn Hernon's bank account, the medical examiner's office submitted the autopsy report, and it was eye-opening to say the least. So what was it in the toxicology report that changed the entire investigation?
The toxicology that came in listed a lot of different controlled substances, but the anomaly in the toxicology was the tetrahydrozoline. Tetrahydrozoline is the active ingredient in eye drops.
The medical examiner informed detectives that if someone ingested large amounts of eye drop medicine like Visine, it could be fatal. And Lynn Hernon had extreme levels of the drug in her body, far beyond what could be construed as accidental.
When it's ingested orally, and those effects can include death, but they can also include a willingness to comply with things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise do.
Investigators considered one last remote possibility that Lynn had consumed the eye drops as a way to end her own life. They discovered the effects were anything but quick.
In talking with our medical examiner and a toxicologist, you quickly realize that this is not a method somebody who wants to end their own life is going to choose. It's a terribly painful, agonizing way to go. You might get very, very sick and then be rushed to a hospital and get medical treatment. So that was a big part of why I was convinced she was poisoned, as opposed to doing this to herself.
Police were now convinced that Lynn Hernon was murdered, and they could make a case.
And so that was a huge red flag to her that really prompted to talk to both the sheriff's detectives and the district attorney's office of this is not a suicide, and really sort of kicked off the homicide investigation.
Detectives suspected that someone who had access to Lynn would be the first place to look, but they needed evidence of a crime and not just suspicions. They focused their investigation on Jesse Krzyzewski.
Obviously, me and you are going to disagree because you're looking at me and you feel that I did this. I understand that, and I get what you're saying, but I didn't. And you don't know Lynn, you don't know the situation, and I'm telling you from somebody who does. I get you're a cop, you investigate, I understand that. But I didn't kill her. Kill her. Kill her.
The sheriff's department asked the medical examiner's office to stop talking with Jesse Krzyzewski about Lynn Hernon and forward any further inquiries to them. And ultimately she comes to the sheriff's department, and investigators did not share what the actual cause of death was. It appeared to me to be Jesse trying to find out what investigators knew and find out what was in that toxicology.
Police had no concrete evidence against anyone in the poisoning of Lynn Hernon, but they were beginning to suspect Jesse had been fleecing the victim for months and possibly even years. They decided to lay a trap for Jesse.
So when they laid the trap, did they reveal that Lynn had been poisoned? And if they did, how did Jesse react?
She's finally told that there was tetrahydrozoline in the toxicology, and Jesse feigns confusion. How could eye drops kill someone? I don't understand. And ultimately decides to tell detectives, okay, Lynn Hernon was suicidal. She was doing anything she could to kill herself. And her story turns into, oh yeah, Lynn was drinking Visine all the time.
Once Jesse began to open up to detectives, the narrative of how Lynn died completely changed.
She was drinking it to kill herself. I knew that there was 6 bottles of Visine in that water bottle. And I didn't want to give it to her, and we fought about it for an hour. But ultimately, it was up to her, it was her life, so I gave it to her and I left. And when I came back, she was unresponsive.
Police now knew that there was a financial incentive to Lynn Hernon's murder, and Jesse's changing story was more evidence that she was complicit in the theft and the death of Lynn. Investigators had discovered that someone was taking money from Lynn Hernon's accounts in her final days. Linking financial improprieties to murder was a leap, but they had to consider the possibility that Jesse Krzyzewski had something to do with her death. One thing was certain: she had lied to police about Lynn's death, and she had served time in prison for forgery and identity theft.
Use of ATMs and cash advances, those all coincided with Jesse getting out of prison in 2016, and she obviously got access to Lynn's accounts. In Lynn's last 2 years of life, Jesse took $144,000 from one account and took another $20,000 from a different account of Lynn's with a series of checks written out to herself. Jesse wasn't forging these checks herself. She was convincing Lynn to do it in this sort of stupor that she had Lynn in.
Did you have like an official arrangement that makes $20 an hour?
No, there was nothing, nothing like that. I mean, there was no, one day, oh, here's a check, one day, here's my card, go get this, one day, I mean, it was no set.
No set amount?
No.
Police and prosecutors were building a case against Jesse Krzyzewski with financial gain as her motive. They theorized that she isolated and controlled Lynn by drugging her with the eye drops so she could steal her money.
So what do you believe led Jesse to go from fraud and theft of an elderly person to murder?
It really is like a horror story. I mean, it's when you think about Lynn's life, and especially the past couple years that she lived, to know that ultimately Jesse Krzyzewski decided that there wasn't enough left to steal, and people were probably about to figure out what had been going on, and she resorted to murder to cover her tracks.
Lynn Hernon's last few days were Jesse Krzyzewski coming over and administering this poison, some agony, dying of the poison of the tetrahydrozoline in her system. well. Jesse Krzyzewski was out trying to open new financial accounts and trying to buy a big screen TV, opening a JCPenney account while knowing that, this woman lay dying in her chair alone.
Homicide detectives now had a timeline of the years, the months, and the days leading up to the murder of Lynn Hernon. They had enough evidence to arrest her lifelong friend, Jesse Krzyzewski. Describe that moment when prosecutors were ready to charge Jesse with murder.
Yeah, when the detectives called us together to talk about what the medical examiner had found, it was like, wow, something really horrible happened to this woman, and the person that did it thought they were going to get away with it. That was when the investigation really revved up, and a ton of subpoenas and warrants were done.
There's no real motive for anybody to lie about somebody's death unless you were involved in it. We had a really strong motive with the finances that we could trace literally from Lynn Hernon's accounts to Jesse's accounts. And we had our medical examiner and toxicologist explaining how eye drops can in fact kill somebody. So the evidence was all there.
Once Jesse realized police were on to her, the only defense was to claim that the money was a gift from her lifelong friend, Lynn Hernon. But she had no defense for what police estimated were 6 bottles of eye drops emptied into Lynn's water bottles. Police arrested and charged Jesse with theft and murder.
Lynn Hernon was killed for a gambling addiction and for Jesse to be the most popular girl at the bar. Jesse is being held accountable, will never be able to do this to somebody else. At least bring some small sense of closure for Lynn's friends and family.
Jesse Krzyzewski was tried and convicted for the murder of Lynn Hernon. It was believed she stole over $300,000 from the victim and used eye drops to poison her over time in a torturous death. She was sentenced to life in prison and another 10 years for the financial thefts, meaning that Jesse will likely die in prison by the time she is eligible for parole. The case is as heartbreaking as it is shocking that something so innocuous as a bottle of eye drops was the weapon of choice to kill, and that Jesse targeted a lifelong family friend, Lynn Hernon, for her evil mission, all in the name of money. And now it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. In the tragic case of Lynn Hernon, the motivation behind the crime was clearly financial. Lynn was befriended by Jesse, who exploited their bond for monetary gain, ultimately leading to a devastating outcome. To protect yourself from similar risks, especially when you suspect that someone may be taking advantage of you, considering the following. Even if you have developed a personal connection, don't share your financial information with anyone. Use your intuition about people and places that make you feel uneasy. A true friend respects your boundaries and considers your feelings. Prioritize vigilance and safety, even with close friends. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.